Hello friends, welcome back. Let's now start building our Harry Potter app. What you're looking at is the web IDE, and let me walk you through the URL. You have to first subscribe, and I'm hoping you already subscribed and you have a login ID. If you've not, you can go to ZOAPIIO.com and create a new account, and you will get a unique instance. What you see here, EB2Z7A, that's my private instance to which I have subscribed. You will get a completely private instance of your own, and when you sign up, you will get a link from where you can launch a designer, and once you do that, you will come here. This is the same ID. If you've seen my earlier tutorials about server apps, you will be familiar with how to come here. Now let's open up the mobile app aspects. So first thing is I want to walk you through the documentation and tell you where it is. So you come to help, guides, and there's an app development guide. It'll open for you in a new window, and I'll walk you through this in a minute. But before that, I want to show you one more link, which is the mobile app quick start. It's a handy little guide that's in app. It will open a new window. So back to the guide. I'm sure you will read this, some of the things, the generic approach, the processes, and the strategy we use. It's all is explained here. What I want to point out is our reference guide. Okay, so this page is an index page for the reference, and this should also tell you, give you an idea of how the application is constructed. Okay, so these are the elements. You go to your designer and you add these elements in your schema, and with each you give properties, and some places you provide code, some places you just create bindings and whatever is necessary to make that page work. So this is a web application which is at the root. Everything else comes below that. Although we're calling it a web application, it's actually web as well as mobile. There are certain parts to it. You can use the same application to run on app as well as run as a mobile as well as web. But we'll come to those things later. There are subtle differences. So here I flagged items which apply only to mobile and only to web. So some of the things, like for example, you can add a custom component. In the sense, system comes with a lot of components pre-configured, but there's always a situation where you need something which is completely custom. So you can provide your own Flutter implementation of the component. Then assets, you need data assets, image assets, and sometimes entire web app as an asset in your app. So you declare those assets. Then the navigation, of course, before that the page. The page itself is composed of views, and views are obviously nested. And then at the lowest level you have the app element. So you create all these things and you build up your app by filling in details against all these elements. If you can just click on something and then you will come to the details page where each attribute is explained as to what it means. So this is an overview of how your application will be constructed, and you can use this when you are doing the development as a reference. There is a programming interface. Of course, there's you need to provide Flutter code in some situations where you want to program interactivity and stuff. So there is actually a little API for the front end. So you will find that there is a global object called $.app, and it's got some methods. So anytime you need to interact within the app or take some action, you will be doing it through the $.app object. It's got some methods, and it's really very short list, just about 10 12 methods. Very simple. That's because you don't have to really do much. System does most of it for you automatically. So if you, when you actually start writing your interactivity and navigation controls, you can come and refer to these things. So that's it. I will now get back to our designer. And the quick start guide, it really tells you how to configure your environment. So the two key things which I must tell you here. One is that this is a web ID. It's working off your browser, and your Android Studio is a desktop application. Okay, and it stores its files and everything on disk. So when you're building the application here, you require you will build and do a generate Flutter app operation, and when the generation is done, it gets downloaded onto your downloads folder. We need a mechanism so that the downloaded files are copied to your Android Studio project folder. Okay, this is a security feature of the browser, that it's not allowed to write to an arbitrary place in your disk, so it can only do a download. So we have a small little Java program. What it does is you will have to download it, compile it on your machine, and what it will do is every time a new download comes, it's going to automatically take that download, extract the contents, and put it into the projects folder. And this is really required because the alternative is that you would have to manually, every time you generate, you have to manually extract those files, which can be a little problematic, because you will be doing this very, very frequently. Every time you make a change and you do a generate, you don't want to just manually open that zip and copy the files. Okay, so you need to download this. Then the second aspect I want to highlight is that when you are building your project, it requires a foundation project which takes care of server-side processing of common functionality. And by common functionality, I mean the login. And the login requires you to have user tables. It needs to have a standard set of tables which manage the user accounts. And of course, there is a small web application as well, which allows you to see who's registered. A lot of admin control. So you need, and since we don't want to kind of digress from our main work, there is a minimal foundation project, which is, it has nothing in it. It just has the functionality that comes by default. So you will also need to download this, and I'll tell you how to process it. Rest of this document tells you how to create a new project in Android Studio. So first thing is, of course, you have to install Android Studio, and you need to install the complete Flutter environment, which I have already done.